Good morning to you, good evening to you rather. My name is Regan Beans. Thank you for joining us on From the South. We begin with this evening's headlines. A special Telesur report reveals U.S. spying on Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA. Polls tie Argentina's presidential candidates Daniel Scioli and Mauricio Macri. And U.S. President Barack Obama says he may be willing to work with Russia to destroy Daesh. The details on these stories and more now on From the South.
Contrary to American values.
Documents obtained by Telesur in partnership with The Intercept have revealed extensive NSA spying on state oil company PDVSA. The United States National Security Agency, the NSA, has been spying on state oil company PDVSA. According to documents leaked by whistleblower Edward Snowden, the U.S. Embassy in Caracas carried out the operation. It is believed that this NSA network of people operating within U.S. embassies worldwide is called the F6 Group. Ahead of the presidential elections in Venezuela set for December 6th, a group of advisors from the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, arrived in Caracas on Tuesday to ensure the transparency of the upcoming elections and that the results are accepted by everyone. The group met with President Nicolas Maduro and will meet with opposition leaders during the week.
We are coming here so the elections go smoothly, so they are transparent, so their results are accepted as proof of the renewed democratic commitment of the people of Venezuela.
Only 4 days left before Argentina's second round of the presidential elections this coming Sunday. The most recent polls show that both Daniel Scioli and Mauricio Macri are technically tied. However, around 60% of the voters say they have yet to decide for whom they will vote. Analysts believe that voters who do not have a political allegiance will define Sunday's election. President Cristina Fernandez urged Argentinians to vote with their collective rights in mind. The grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo have also expressed their support for ruling party candidate Daniel Scioli and have called for Argentinians to vote for him. The grandmothers are outspoken supporters of President Cristina Kirchner for the work done by her government, to try crimes committed during the dictatorship in the 1970s.
If the right wins, that will lead us towards being a dependent country, that will open imports without controls, national companies will close down, unemployment will come back. We don't want a country kneeling before the US, nor devaluation, which is the only economic policy measure they made public.
On Tuesday, police raided the trading desk of Argentina's central bank after a prosecutor accused its president of directing the bank to sell US dollar reserves below international standard. The central bank called the complaint unfounded and blamed it on what it says was a politically motivated witch hunt against the bank's chief Alejandro Vanoli ahead of Sunday's election. 17 of 24 Ecuadorian provinces have been declared in a state of exception due to the El Niño phenomenon. The U.S. National Weather Service experts have said that El Niño will be merciless this year. Ecuadorian authorities said that the preventative measure was pushed forward after meteorologists concluded that the effects could be similar to those back in 1997, when it caused losses equivalent to 14.5% of Ecuador's GDP. According to the experts, this week the weather pattern started setting records of its own, with some of the warmest weekly temperatures ever seen across swaths of the equatorial Pacific. Next, we move to Peru, where a conference on solving world hunger is sparking a debate on how the host country is measuring the issue. Telesur's Ryan Mora explains.
Peru has one of the highest rates of malnutrition in Latin America. Maria Moncada is a single mother to 3 children. and has often great difficulties to feed her children and to provide nutritious food for them.
One has to find the way, the manner of being able to give them a plate of food at the table every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and at dinner. And that makes you feel powerless, because one as an adult can withstand hunger, but the children can't.
On Monday, the International Forum of the Parliamentary Front Against Hunger took place in Lima, the capital of the country. Participants included politicians, subject experts, and UN officials who exposed the problem and presented proposals.
Overall, there are 34 million people in Latin America who suffer from hunger. Therefore, the data continue to be alarming, even though we have statistically reached the Millennium Goals. We at the Parliamentary Front aim at moving forward much more, calling attention on what is still missing.
The Peruvian Congress has approved many of the recommendations of the forum, but so far, President Ollanta Humala has not signed the bills or has not set up the rules for their implementation.
What we lament the most is that in our country, these laws are not fully implemented. The law of healthy eating was passed 2 years ago, but it hasn't been implemented because of business lobbyists and small groups in the administration blocking the law.
Last week, Congress approved a new draft to promote food security, but the concern of those who voted in favor of it is that the president will continue to stall the process. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
A new environment protection deal between Cuba and the United States affords an unprecedented opportunity for the scientists and managers of protected areas to collaborate. That's according to U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere, Catherine Sullivan. Both countries, having signed the document, have now agreed to cooperate on environment protection. Under the deal, there will be collaborative work on the conservation of protected marine areas, including the Guanahacabibes National Park on the west of the island of Cuba, and the U.S. Flower Garden Banks and Florida Key Sanctuaries, as well as the Dry Tortugas and Biscayne Bay National Parks.
We understand that this document marks the beginning of a sustained process of exchange which allows us to develop scientific investigations and share good practices for the handling and conservation of areas identified as holding a common interest, for beneficial cooperation between our nations, the region, and the world.
This is one of the most exciting results of the newly opened relationship between the United States and Cuba. It affords us an unprecedented opportunity for the scientists and managers in our protected areas to collaborate. Working together and learning together, we can develop the best ways to protect some of the world's most outstanding marine environments for generations to come.
And the Cuban government has blamed the United States for having over 1,000 Cuban nationals stuck at Central American border crossings trying to reach the U.S., where Cubans receive special treatment. According to what authorities in the islands say, it's a Cold War-era immigration law. Cubans are welcomed in the U.S. without a visa and get a permanent residence with relative ease. Cuban migration has increased as locals anticipate a possible end to the preferential treatment due to the renewal of diplomatic ties. But Nicaragua closed its borders with Costa Rica on Sunday in an attempt to stop them.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs wants to emphasize that these citizens are victims of the politicization of the issue of migration by the U.S. government, of the Cuban Adjustment Act, and in particular of the so-called wet foot, dry foot policy, which confers specific treatment on the Cuban people.
The fall of crude oil prices is having an impact on Mexico's public spending. Our correspondent Clayton Kahn has those details.
At $30.36, Mexico's barrel of crude oil is at its lowest since December of 2008, when the price was at $30.38. Now, this new low comes after a series of 9 drops in the price of Mexico's crude over the past month. Now, according to analysts, the major factor of this dramatic drop is the excessive supply of crude in the international market, especially coming from the United States. Now, it has been reported, or according to the U.S.'s Energy Information Agency, that the North American country has gone from producing producing 4.2 million barrels of crude to 487 million. Now, the effects of the excessive production has taken a hit on Mexico's own public finances, given that the country relies heavily on the income produced by its state-owned oil company, Pemex. Now, Mexico had expected to cash in $53.3 billion from selling crude. However, the actual amount has been about $35.5 billion, or essentially $17 billion less that has not been made in income. Now, this has taken a hit on public spending for education and science programs, as well as aid to the agricultural sector, which has been announced in the recently approved 2016 budget. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
The leaders of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, are meeting this Wednesday and Thursday in Dominica, which was recently devastated by Tropical Storm Erica last August. More on this story with Telesur's Alison Kentish from St. Lucia.
Heads of government of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States will meet in Dominica over the next 2 days. Now, Dominica was chosen specifically as host country for the high-level meeting to demonstrate the solidarity of the OECS heads of government with the island, which was devastated by Tropical Storm Erica in late August. The 62nd meeting of the OECS Authority got underway in the capital, Roseau, this morning with an opening ceremony. The meeting is being chaired by Grenadian Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell. Two heads of government are attending their very first OECS Authority meeting. They are Victor Banks of Anguilla and Dr. Timothy Harris, who is the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. Host Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit says the leaders will tackle issues affecting the socio-economic development of the sub-region. The 9 heads of government are expected to discuss matters pertaining to an update on applications by French Caribbean countries for membership in the OECS, as well as proposed strategies for Dominica's recovery, a proposal for OECS future disaster responsiveness, rights contingent to free movement of people within the OECS, the integration of Martinique into the OECS, and matters pertaining to the OECS Assembly. The heads of government are also expected to visit communities that were severely affected by Tropical Storm Erica and to engage with residents at a town hall meeting in one of those communities. Alison Kentish, Telesur, St. Lucia.
Here's what's coming up next. It's uncertain who's responsible for the recent bomb blasts in Nigeria, but authorities have an idea. More on this story next.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Rod stars G1 and Claudia de la Cruz are Rebel Diaz, hip-hop activists positioned within a history of political resistance through music. And You Don't Stop. They invite young people to express themselves about their social struggles. And You Don't Stop. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington, wherever the newsmakers will be there. Watch on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. Within the last 24 hours, a bomb exploded in a market in the northeastern Nigerian city of Yola, killing 32 people and injuring 80 others. It was a chaotic scene as family members searched for their loved ones and others searched for their friends. No one or organization has yet claimed responsibility for the incident. However, it is believed that the militant extremist group Boko Haram may be to blame.
There was a woman who is selling food with people who is selling suya. So the boy just came where they were selling food, order for a food. Immediately he sat down. The next thing, explosion came.
The Dash English language magazine, The Beak, this week published photos said to be the bodies of a Norwegian and a Chinese captive for whom the group had demanded a ransom 2 months ago. The Norwegian man has been identified as 48-year-old Ole Johan Grimskar Ofstad of Norway, and the Chinese man, 50-year-old Fan Jingyi of China. There is a caption under the images which read, "Executed after being abandoned by infidel nations and organizations." It is unknown when the men were taken hostage by the group. The magazine also published a photo of a bomb said to have been responsible for the crash of the Russian airliner that crashed in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula last month. The crash killed all 224 people on board. The magazine published, quote, "This was to show the Russians and whoever allies with them that they will have no safety in the lands of and airspace of the Muslims," end quote. Meanwhile, US President Barack Obama said that he is open to collaboration with Russia if Putin switches his focus to Daesh. He made these remarks at the annual Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in the Philippines, adding that he was against Russia's targeting of the opponents of the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Obama said that he wanted Putin to shift his focus and the focus of his military to what is the principal threat, ISIL.
If we get a better understanding with Russia about the process for bringing an end to the Syrian civil war, that obviously opens up more opportunities for coordination with respect to ISIL.
People who witnessed or heard the terrorist attacks in Paris last Friday can now receive counseling. This as investigations continue into the bombings and shootings that killed 129 people in downtown Paris. Forensic officials have also begun investigations into the location where a woman blew herself up in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis on Wednesday morning. The search is also ongoing for Abdelhamid Abaoud, a Belgian Islamist militant who is believed to be the mastermind behind last Friday's attacks. A new campaign group called Leave EU, which is in support of Britain leaving the European Union, launched this week, and it's joined forces with the group Vote Leave. Co-founder of the group EU Group, businessman Richard Tice, spoke at the launch. He used the attacks in Paris last Friday to say that Britain would be safer if it left the EU. The group says that it already has 300,000 registered voters and is launching a major drive to get people registered to vote when Prime Minister David Cameron announces the referendum debate. Cameron has been pushing to remain in a reformed European Union.
A United Kingdom that is free to set its own laws, control its own borders, and free of the handcuffs of the European Union that make us a 10% subsidiary of a lumbering EU that cannot reform, will not reform, and is declining in global economic importance in the 21st century.
One of the austerity measures set to be implemented by the Greek government after having agreed to the billion-dollar bailout deal is a doubling of the income tax rate for farmers from 13% to 26%. In response, about 6,000 farmers gathered in Athens in protest of the new measures. When they tried to enter the parliament building, police officers used tear gas to disperse them. The farmers say that the tax increases would lead to the disappearance of the agricultural sector. The body of one African refugee was recovered as Spanish lifeguards rescued 22 men off the coast of Western Sahara. They say that 20 others are yet to be found. The men, who said that their boat sank, were taken to Gran Canaria Island and tended to by Red Cross volunteers. Officials are still on the search for the remaining refugees. The Rafah border, which links Egypt to Gaza, is a pivotal crossing point for many. However, Egypt regularly keeps the borders closed for security reasons. Telesur's Noor Harazin shed some light on recent developments that require the immediate opening of the border, and it may be a matter of life and death.
A committee of stranded Palestinian travelers in Gaza Strip organized a sit-and protest in front of the Ministry of Civil Affairs in Gaza City, protesting Egypt's closure of Rafah border crossing. The protesters appealed to the Egyptian authorities, the Palestinian Authority, and all the concerned parties to ensure a rapid, proper, and permanent opening of the crossing to ease their suffering. Rafah border crossing was last opened at the beginning of September to allow Gaza pilgrims access to Saudi Arabia to perform Hajj. It was exceptionally opened once more by mid-October for the return of the Palestinians stranded in Egypt.
We arranged this protest in solidarity with those stranded in Gaza. The stranded people in Gaza have been harmed since the blockade was imposed by Israel 7 or 8 years ago. We personally call on President Mahmoud Abbas to intervene for the opening of Rafah crossing. There are 5,000 stranded students, 800 stranded cancer patients who are in bad need for surgeries outside Gaza Strip.
Meanwhile, Egypt has repeatedly accused Hamas of presenting support to the Islamic militants in Sinai, who have been carrying out attacks against its security forces since the ouster of the former Egyptian President Mohammed Morsi in July 2013. Ever since, the Egyptian authorities have occasionally opened the terminal in both directions for an average of 3-day periods, referring its long periods of closure to security reasons. According to Hamas's run Interior Ministry, about 25,000 Palestinians, including students and patients, are stuck in Gaza Strip, waiting for the crossing to open. Nur Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
Philippine President Benigno Aquino kicked off the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit with a Business Advisory Council plenary session. APEC aims to support economic growth in the Asia-Pacific region. It promotes free and open trade and investment, as well as regional economic integration among its 21 members. This year, the summit will also focus on inclusive growth and partnership between the government and the business community.
From ABA. Allow me to state that we in APEC are...
Here now is a brief look at other major stories across the world.
November 20th marks the 70th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials, said to be a foundation of the international justice system. At the trials, back in 1945, Nazi leaders were accused of conspiracy, war crimes, crimes against peace, and crimes against humanity. Some were even sentenced to death.
This is a universal topic. One encounters it, of course, very strongly during the Nazi period and with the National Socialist criminals. But it is a topic that we all encounter every day, the question of law and justice. It is a universal topic that is linked to those trials.
2 Air France planes landed safely after anonymous phone calls claimed that there were bombs on board. Flight 65 from Los Angeles and Flight 55 from Washington had already taken off when the calls came in. They were directed to land where no bombs were found. And the President of the Republic of South Sudan, Salva Kiir Mayardit, appealed to the parliamentarians to support a peace deal that would end the country's 2-year-old civil war. The war has already forced 2.3 million people from their homes. Mayardit said that the bloodshed and destruction must come to an end.
Reports are that Chile's top football official Sergio Jadu has gone into witness protection in the United States. Jadu was spotted at Santiago Airport, where he told reporters that he was headed to the United States to vacation with his family. One newspaper, La Tercera, however, said that he was going to collaborate on the investigation being carried out with the FBI. South American officials are suspected of corruption in deals to award television rights for the Copa America tournament. And preparations continue in Brazil for the 2016 Rio Olympics. The country's top table tennis Olympic contenders will be testing the venue and the conditions for the next few days. The men's and women's teams are performing in mock tournaments at the Rio Centro complex in Barra de Tijuca, which is where most of the games will be focused next year. Facilitators are testing the competition areas, the results system, the sport-specific volunteers, and the dynamic of different details, and of course getting additional tournament practice as well. And before we close, we go back to the developments in Paris, where geopolitical analyst, editor of StopImperialism.com is with us right now, Eric Draitser, and he's going to help us better understand what's going on there. Hi, Mr. Dritz. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. Can you give us an update on what's happening right now in the Paris investigations?
Well, we're seeing the images coming through on our TV screens of shootouts and raids and the killing of at least a number of suspects allegedly involved in this plot. But I think the larger question here has to do with the investigation. It has to do with assigning motives and potentially trying to construct a narrative of exactly what happened. You see, although we're seeing all of these images flashing on our TV screens, there's been very little context provided aside from assorted news stories in a couple of different papers here in the West. Of course, primarily we need to be asking ourselves, what is the role of foreign policy in all of this? Because if we are to accept the claim of responsibility from the so-called Islamic State, then of course it begs the question, why France and why now? And obviously the larger issue here has to do with the United States, the British and the French especially, and their involvement with terrorism and the war in Syria. So even if we're to accept the standard narrative of what supposedly happened in Paris, we then are led to the obvious question of to what extent is French foreign policy and U.S. foreign policy an instigator of precisely these events? And then, of course, the other question that we need to be asking is to what extent can we believe the information that has come out to this point, which at many times has been contradictory and conflicting, to say the least?
Well, those are lots of important questions that you've risen right there. And it's been in quite a bit of debate across the world by intellectuals. What do you think is the role of French policy and, of course, as it has resulted in these attacks?
Well, look, I mean, we have to obviously extend our sympathy to the people of France and to people who have been victimized by terrorism, but we can't shy away from asking the very obvious question of why terrorism struck at France. And I think an obvious direction of investigation has to be the cooperation between French intelligence and terrorist elements in Syria in that war. It's been documented by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a number of other media outlets that the DGSE, that is French intelligence agency, has been on the ground in Syria and along the Turkish-Syrian border since at least 2011, 2012, involved in funneling weapons and terrorists into the country for the purposes of effecting regime change against the Syrian government. This is a fundamental foreign policy position that France has taken, and in many ways, France has been somewhat the leading edge in the regime change attempt in Syria. Foreign Minister Fabius has been one of the most vocal proponents of the removal of Assad by force if necessary. And again, if we're to accept this narrative of what happened in Paris, then this is an outgrowth of French foreign policy. But of course, that can't shy us away from asking a lot of these difficult questions. The extent to which terrorism comes back on those who foment it.
Mr. Dritz, let me just ask you, there's been a lot of discourse as well about the desired response that Daesh wants from its victims, like France right now. And of course, President Hollande currently he has a very warlike discourse. How do you think this contributes to the entire war?
Well, naturally, it provides the pretext for the French military to expand their involvement to engage in a bombing campaign. Now, there's an interesting political backdrop to all of this that may or may not have figured into the calculus of the terrorist group that carried out this attack, namely that the French military and the French political establishment has come to a fork in the road, so to speak, wherein they have to either side with or side against Russia in the ongoing war in Syria, because of course Russia is launching daily airstrikes against Islamic State positions throughout the country, as well as a number of other terrorist groups. Now, the direction in which France goes, either cooperating with Russia and the other actors in the region, or cooperating with the United States and undermining Russia, that will have a significant impact on the development and course of this war in Syria. So in many ways, what's happened in Paris is going to directly impact the trajectory of the war in Syria. Naturally, on the one hand, the United States, and on the other hand, Russia are desperately trying to play the events in Paris and the war in Syria to their own political advantage. But I think that the question remains, how will this impact the attempt at regime change in Syria? Will this drive the French government to side with Russia in the belief that there has to be a political settlement? If there is a political resolution to the situation in Syria vis-a-vis the war on Syria and the state of Syria, then that frees up the possibility for a coalition against the Islamic State. But if the Western powers and Russia are working at cross purposes, then we're looking at an even more dangerous conflict that escalates from here on out.
So much, Mr. Dreitzer. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Hopefully we can touch base with you sometime in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And that's how we wrap up this episode of From the South this evening. Thank you so much for watching. For more on these and other stories, you can visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. And of course, feel free to join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.